All right. Are you all ready to get started? I love that our EMS lieutenant just gave me a thumbs up. I think that means we are ready. I am Christina Bowen, and I know so many of you in this room, and so you know that I'm a family medicine physician and then also get the joy of practicing integrative and lifestyle medicine at the Center for Healthy Living. A big shout out. My team's here. Raise your hand. They're incredible. They're such a huge part of this movement. And I also get the opportunity to serve as the Chief Wellbeing Officer for ECU Health. And I'll tell you why that's near and dear to my heart. You can hear in my accent, I'm from Eastern North Carolina. And the mission of ECU Health is to care for the health and well-being of Eastern North Carolina. And it is no surprise to you all. That's what the Outer Banks Health does every day. That's what I've experienced since the lieutenant of EMS is my friend. He is up here like, yes, that is exactly what we do. We really, the heart with this team at Outer Banks Health and with the Dare County Health Department in caring for this incredible community is just astounding. And just their progressive nature in which they care for their community members is incredible. And so it's no surprise that we are the first place in Eastern North Carolina that is starting to paint the Outer Banks blue, right? That we're the first place that's thinking about being Blue Zone certified. I want to tell you all a story about why are we doing this. So I still see patients in my clinic, and I was seeing a cancer survivor in my clinic a few weeks ago, and she said to me, you know what, Dr. Bowen, and we see her for survivorship, lifestyle medicine, much like the Power 9 that you're going to learn about from Danny Buettner. She's been practicing that for 2 years. And she looked at me and she said, honestly, she's in her 70s, I feel the best I've ever felt in my entire life. And it makes me almost cry. I don't want people to have cancer to know how to live like this, right? I want this to be how we live. The healthy way is the easy way. It's what we do. It's who we are in the Outer Banks. And I want this for us sitting in this room, and I want this for my 8-year-old that biked to school with me today. I want this to be who we are in the Outer Banks and truly to paint the Outer Banks blue. I think that our community's ready for that. I have gotten to spend a little bit of time with the Blue Zones team that got to tour the Outer Banks for the last 24 hours. And Christy with their team came up and said, oh my gosh, like, y'all, you're really doing it. I was like, oh, we are a light shade of blue. Yes, we are. So it is not a stretch for us. And that really is a testament to the leadership at Outer Banks Health and Dare County with the health department, just in recognizing the importance of prevention of chronic disease, and that we can actually reverse chronic disease, and that we can prevent cancer. We've seen this with our cancer. I know Amy will probably share a little bit with you about this towards the end of the presentation, but we've seen the power of this with how we have changed cancer mortality in the Outer Banks. 20 years ago, we were worse, and we were not as good as the state. Right? We're better now. And so that's exactly what we want to do with chronic disease, with prevention and reversal of chronic disease. It's my joy to get to introduce my friend and partner in helping us really shape Eastern North Carolina and really truly improve the health and well-being that starts with little healthy behavior changes every day. It's a journey. And Danny, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Bowen. You are a light shade blue. I've only been here 3 hours, and I'm already plotting to go for a run on the beach tomorrow. Us Midwesterners have to take all the opportunities that we get when we come to a place like this. I'm Danny Buettner, Dan Buettner Jr. 2.0. People call me a lot of different things. My father founded the work with the research. I today work with a great team. Many of them are in the room today. You'll get to meet them. You already have met some of them. And I serve as Chief Development Officer and Executive Vice President for Blue Zones. It's a privilege to partner with American communities that are already on a journey of well-being, a journey of what is their post-pandemic narrative, a journey of what's the posterity promise to the next generation of people that are going to inherit our community. So looking forward to being here this week. This week is made possible by ECU Health, by Outer Banks Health, by Dare County, and over 60 people that helped pre-plan and orchestrate this week's events. So this is like 8 months of culmination here. And then last but not least, I'm going to recognize all of you. It's a gorgeous night out there. It's Goldilocks. And here you are in a room with us learning about blue zones. You could be out there surfing or on the beach or at home watching the pre-presidential debate talking heads. I promise this will be infinitely better for your wellness and well-being than that. In exchange for your time today, I promise you 3 things. And I will be 45 minutes flat. We'll do Q&A conversation. And then Amy Montgomery is going to bring us home. 3 things. Number 1, I'm going to give you lessons. Not from my life, but from the world's longest lived people. Longest lived cultures. Best practice from our species. Lessons that you can bring into your life, into your family. I'm sure a lot of you are going to say, I do a lot of this already. This is a special place here in the Outer Banks. Number 2 I'm going to give you for your time is I'm going to give you a peek under the hood at the model. What is it that we do with communities? How do communities rob and duplicate what we do? Make it your own story, but move the needle through an evidence-based approach. And then the third thing is we're going to have a little fun. We're going to leverage some sex jokes and some humor from the world's longest lived grandmas and grandpas, which is always good right around happy hour. All right, so first, in the name of fun, I thought we could do a little exercise, a little icebreaker. And it's a fun icebreaker. It's called measuring how long each of you are going to live. It sounds macabre, but trust me, it's pretty fun, not too dark. All right, so this is a lifestyle diagnostic. This is something that Dr. Bowen might do with a patient. A lifestyle diagnostic. This was developed, this 8-question diagnostic, by the National Institutes of Aging over by Washington, D.C., not far from here. 8 questions to get us within a margin of error of about 15%, how long we ought to live based on our life choices. It's a controlled diagnostic, so it doesn't account for the extra risky people in the crowd who, want to go drink ayahuasca and go surfing under a full moon or something like that. This is more run-of-the-mill American variety. All right, you ready? Yeah. You have 2 jobs during this diagnostic. When I ask one of the 8 questions, if the question applies to you in the affirmative, you raise your hand. And job number 2, which is hard at happy hour, you have to remember at the end how many times you rose your hand because we're going to add it up. All right? 2 jobs. Question number 1. Raise your hand if you get 7 hours of sleep 5 nights a week. 7 hours of sleep, 5 nights. Wow. Very well-rested crowd. My guess is most of the tourists have left. And now sleep's improved. Okay. Very well-rested crowd. Number 2, this is going to be a gimme for you guys. Raise your hand if you get 45 minutes of physical activity every single day. You move your body for 45 minutes every single day. That is fantastic. I asked that question in Iowa, where I'm from, up in the Midwest, and I get like 3 hands. Question number 3. Raise your hand if you get 3 honest servings of veggies every single day. 3 honest servings of veggies, and French fries and ketchup don't count. 3. All right, some room for improvement. Question number 4. Raise your hand if you have abstained. In other words, you don't do it anymore. Abstained from unprotected sex with strangers. I got a lot of half hands in the air. Dr. Bowen, I like this community. I like this community. All right, these are real questions. Question number 5. Raise your hand if you have at least 3 good friends. 3 good friends who you can have a meaningful conversation with. You can call them when you're having a bad day, and you actually like them. All right, so extremely well connected crowd. That's huge. Isolation, massive problem in America today. Massive epidemic. Question number 6, raise your hand if you belong to a faith-based community and you show up 4 times a month. Any kind of creed, any kind of, okay. So meditation counts. Meditation counts. I know there's yogis. Bree, I see you. Question number 7, raise your hand if you've not smoked in the last 5 years. Tobacco. All right, there you go. Very God love you. And question number 8. And according to Dr. Paul Costas from the National Institutes of Aging, this question is weighted more heavily than the other 8 questions as far as a determinant, as far as a diagnostic. This question is, raise your hand if you desire and you believe you can make it to age 90. You want it and you believe you can get there. All right, about 70% of the crowd. Believe it or not, some of the communities that we travel to, you get less than 50% of the crowd because of what they see, their lived experience is to age in their community. All right, the reason that last question is a little bit weighted is because you know 3 things that your doctor at Outer Banks Health doesn't know. You know how you feel today. You know how you've lived up until today. You know where all the skeletons are in your choices. And you know pretty darn well when you leave the doctor's office how you're going to go on living your life. So having the want and having the belief is huge. All right, let's score how we did. If you're a man and you rose your hand twice, 68 years of life expectancy. Woman, 72. If you're a man, you rose your hand 6 times, 88 years of life expectancy. Woman, 92 years of life expectancy. Did anybody raise their hand all 8 times? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Round of applause. It's good. Says the guy with 6 kids.
Yeah. All 4 grandparents still alive.
And all 4 grandparents are alive. Congratulations to all the ones that raised your hand 8 times. You are excused to the bar downstairs. I have nothing I can teach you. All right. So that gets us thinking about how we're scoring based on our lifestyle choices. And the bottom line is the shelf life of the human body is about 90 years. All things being equal, if we make the right choices, our lives, we're engineered over millennia to live long enough to have kids, see our kids have kids, and then the evolutionary effects start to dissipate. It's time to make space for the next generations. So shelf life of the human body is about 90 years, but in America, our life expectancy is about 78. So somewhere along the line, we are leaving 12 good years on the table. And that was the original premise of the Blue Zones 26 years ago, when the original Blue Zones expeditionary team set out to figure out how do we get those extra 12 years of good life back. It's been a great journey. I'm going to take you to the Blue Zones. We're going to visit all 5 Blue Zones. We're going to learn those lessons from the world's longest lived. We call them the Power 9. We're going to talk about the model, but a little bit about the company. We have 200 people working all across these United States, partnering with communities. We don't do anything to communities. This is work that we partner together. It's a train the trainer model. That's why we do this process, so that you all can evaluate if this is something that is accelerant to what you're already doing, and if this is something that you want to own and make the next iteration of, make the next version of the Outer Banks story. So our purpose statement, if you can see it up there very deliberately, is to empower everyone everywhere to live better longer. Anybody who has kids or grandkids know you can't do something to somebody. It doesn't stick. It doesn't stick. So Blue Zone's been a great story. Raise your hand if you heard of Blue Zones before Dr. Ayler, Dr. Bowen, or Amy Montgomery. Okay, so about 80% of the group. We've kind of gone viral. We're very proud of the work. You know, Zac Efron talks about us, and Matthew McConaughey, and Oprah. The communities we partner with, they make it their story instead of a Blue Zone story. You got to celebrate the wins. Who's seen our Netflix? All right, so for the half of you that haven't, you have some homework, some extra credit you can go do and watch our Netflix. Back in September, actually a year ago, right now, it was #1 on the planet for Netflix, 180 countries, for a whole week until a children's pirate TV show dethroned it. It got nominated for 6 Emmys, won 3 Emmys, beat out Days of Our Lives for one of the daytime shows. Very proud of that work. And the momentum just continues. And, you know, I sound a little braggadocious, but we are proud that the research, the anthology, the science, the brand continues to grow because the brand has tactical value. It allows us to tell a bigger story and to bring in a bigger engagement of people that might otherwise not have been brought into traditional public health, population health, well-being initiatives. All right, let's start with the journey. So there's Dan Sr., who started this work back in 1999. He's doing field research in this picture, working very hard, as you can see. He circumnavigated the planet in 1999, 2000, with a team and a grant from National Geographic and the National Institutes of Health with a simple proposition to find those extra dozen years of life, to find the key to longevity. They thought they were going to find an herb or maybe a honey or some super genetic. And instead, what they found were these 5 dots on the map. 5 places where people are reaching age 100 at 10x the rate that we are in the United States. They're doing it with a fraction of the disease prevalence that we have in the United States, mental, metabolical, physical. Everything is fractional to the morbidities and comorbidities that we have in the United States. And there's a couple kickers about these 5 dots on the map, and I'm going to take you to all 5 tonight. Kicker number 1, 3 out of 5 of these dots are at or below the poverty line. They don't have a Whole Foods or an ECU Health. They have something else going on. They have something else. Best practice from our species. We call them the Power 9. Here's the second kicker of these 5 dots, and I'm going to come back to this one. Of the 350 centenarians, 100-year-olds, world's oldest old, not a single one that we have embedded ourselves with over 2 decades, not a single one pursued health, pursued longevity, pursued purpose or connection or belonging. For all of them, it ensued as a byproduct of where they lived and what community they belong to. That is the intervention. What community you belong to and where you live, the environment that you live within. Before I take you to these Blue Zones, this is more than a story. This is more than marketing. This is more than a brand. These are demographically confirmed, geographically defined places around the world. MDs, anthropologists, demographers, epidemiologists. We're along for the ride to make sure that we're documenting everything and validating the stats. Without further ado, world's longest lived men on planet Earth are on this island, not Outer Banks. Sardinia. Sardinia is the little soccer ball island that the Italian boot kicks if you're looking at a globe on the map. Ground zero for longest lived men on Earth. In America, we produce 100-year-old dude for every 5,000 births. In the blue spot, in the highlands, you can tell it's highlands because there's contour lines. So it's not the whole island, actually, is not a blue zone. The phenomenon is in the highlands, and I'm going to come back to that. But in those highlands, they produce 600-year-old men for every 1,000 births. So truly an anomaly, a phenomenon going on here. A little bit isolated, right? They got some topography, so they're a little bit removed from the rest of the island, certainly removed from mainland Italy. It's a cluster of about 14 villages, 42,000 residents. You walk down, it's kind of like you're going back in time to a Bronze Age culture, almost like back to the time of Christ. And it's here that you have 102-year-old men riding a motorcycle, chopping wood, and beating a guy 60 years younger in an arm wrestle at 7 in the morning, already after a tumbler of vino. Now, a lot of these blue zones, there was evidence that there was an anomaly before blue zones got there. This group of men are part of a longitudinal study from the University of Rome, studying these remarkable men in the highlands of Sardinia. And the University of Rome concluded 3 commonalities that these old men had. One was barley consumption. For some reason, they all ate a lot of barley when they were getting surveyed. We thought that was interesting. The second commonality was the number of daughters that they had. Men with 4 or more daughters. You got 4 daughters. All right, Lieutenant McKinney has 4 daughters. You'll like this. The men with 4 or more daughters tended to reach age 100 at higher rates than men who did not. And we don't know if that's because daughters, unlike their sons, stick around and take care of mom and dad as mom and dad get older, or if it's because any guy that can survive 4 teenage girls in his house can survive anything. But it was the third commonality that blue zones seized upon, and that was their profession. We really thought the third commonality was the standout. And this is our first Power 9 lesson. Remember, the effect of longevity is not the whole island. The lowlands of Sardinia are good for farming. So the male professions in the lowlands is they're farmers. And anybody who grew up on a farm or a degree of separation from a farm can appreciate that there's very active planting and harvesting seasons, but very sedentary growing seasons. And so, indeed, we did not see the effect of longevity there. In the highlands, the soil's wrong, the pests are wrong, the climate's wonky. It's no good for agriculture. So the profession of the world's longest lived men is they are sheep and goat herders. These men are waking up every day when the sun is good and hot in the sky, as I'm sure a lot of people in the Outer Banks wait for. They get up and they go and walk a 5K. A 5K on uneven terrain with their goats, with their brothers, with their friends, with their sons. And they suffer a fifth the rate of hip fractures that their Italian counterparts do. So the first Power 9 is move naturally. Move naturally. Ideally on uneven terrain. This portable lifestyle has led to a portable diet. So they have a special kind of bread made from a bacteria, lactobacillus. It's a type of sourdough bread. I'm sure there's many sourdough bread fans in the audience today. And this bread is special because when you eat it, your blood sugar actually goes down. By the way, all these recipes are free at bluezones.com. So any food that I talk about here today, you can check out. They eat a little bit of dairy, although unlike the corn-fed cow's dairy that we drink in the Midwest, where I'm from, it's grass-fed sheep's milk, which has the perfect mix of omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids. We are not vegans. We are not vegans at Blue Zones. We acknowledge plant slant, which is one of the Power 9 that I'll talk about. And indeed, it's not the world's longest lived people aren't vegans either. So these guys do eat a little bit of animal protein, and they get very, very excited when it's time to have that animal protein. Usually though, it's a celebratory event, and it's usually an aperitif. So about the size of a deck of cards versus, the main dish. But indeed, most of what they're eating in all Blue Zones is plant slant, 80 to 90% plant-based food. These guys are munching on fava beans, legumes, and nuts. They're eating a handful of nuts every hour, which is actually the perfect caloric meal. And good news for 2/3 of Americans, they like their happy hour in Sardinia. Nothing like muddy boots to add terroir to your bouquet. This actually is a special kind of wine. You can look it up. It's called Cannonau. It's from Sardinia. When you ferment grapes in the winemaking process, almost all vintners remove the seeds and the skins from the grapes before they put it through the fermentation process. Turns out that's where all the antioxidants are. That's where all the good flavonoids are. So Cannonau wine is one of the only wines out there that keeps the skins and the seeds in during the fermentation process. So it's kind of a medicine, one that they apply regularly. Just as important as diet and moving naturally is belonging. Belonging. The older you get, the more you're revered. You're kept close to the family unit. You know, here in America, the younger you are, the more of a TikTok star you are. There, the older you get, the more you're revered, and expectations don't go away. So they are practicing purpose. Purpose is another of the Blue Zone's Power 9. If purpose was a pharmaceutical drug, with the outcomes that giving purpose has, it would be a blockbuster of all blockbusters when it comes to pills. These guys practice their purpose. Maybe they don't punch the clock like they used to, but they still serve on city councils and city foot patrols, walking around, helping people out. They have wisdom of the agriculture and the climate and recipes that the men and women pass on generation to generation. And the last blue zones that we see in Sardinia, Power 9, is loved ones first. Family units that have a grandparent close to the unit or living with the family, children have a fraction of the disease prevalence and higher education rates than those who don't have a grandparent close. Guess who else benefits? Grandma and grandpa, to the tune of 6 to 8 years of added life expectancy. So loved ones first. It's actually the World Health Organization that identified that for the first time. All right, let's check in on our ladies. World's longest lived women on planet Earth, on the archipelago of Okinawa, Japan. This cluster of islands has been known as the land of the immortals. For thousands of years, they've had it tough. It has been a hard scrabble, Spartan life. They've been invaded by everybody in the South Pacific since the dawn of time. Famine, pesticides, genocides, you name it. And yet, world's longest lived women on planet Earth persevere there to this day. What's their secret? Once again, we see plant slant, Power 9 plant slant. Check out this profile on these girls, and I'm going to read this off. Longest disability-free life expectancy anywhere in the world. 7 good years longer than the average American. 5 times as many 100-year-old women. 1/5 the rate of breast cancer. 1/5 the rate of colon cancer. Big killers of Americans here in the United States. That first bullet point I'm going to touch on for a second. I'm going to emphasize this. Every American in this room and watching is going to go through what's called a morbidity period in their life. It sounds sucky because it is sucky. It's usually the last 5 years of your life, and most Americans will spend 90% of their total life healthcare spend in that last 5 years. A lot of people are sick. Maybe they have comorbidities, infirm, God forbid. They're disabled. They're in and out of the doctor's office. They're in and out of the pharmacy. It's not a great time to be alive. And in America, I'm sorry to say, but the morbidity period for the average American is expanding from 5 to 7 years. These girls' morbidity period is compressed to under a year. Under a year. So that means they live long, they live good, and then they die fast, often in their sleep, often after sex. I don't inquire into the methodology of that research. So these girls, their life is revolving around their gardens, They take care of their gardens are taking care of them. These are 90-year-old women doing 50 air squats every single day, whether it's from deconvenienced homes, so they sit and they host seated on the floor without chairs and furniture, or taking care of their garden. They're 50 air squats every single day. You can find a lot of 50-year-old Americans who can't do 50 air squats. They take care of their garden takes care of them. Some veggies we recognize, other veggies we don't. This is called the Goya melon or the bitter melon. They chop it up into chunks, put it in a stir fry. It's delicious. Kills certain cancer-causing blood cells, believe it or not. Just as important as what they put into their body is what they don't put into their body. Obesity, overeating is a huge problem for our fellow Americans. They have a cool little Confucian adage, a Confucian adage that was born thousands of years ago during those hard scrabble times when famine, when the plants didn't grow or they get invaded and they had to live a Spartan life. They needed moderation for sustenance. And so they would recite a Confucius adage called Hari Hachi Bu, which translated means stop when you're 80% full. And it's really clever because it's both showing respect for your circumstances, but it's giving your stomach 5-10 minutes to let your brain know we're good here. We're full. You don't have to eat anymore. You don't have to overeat. But it turns out if you go to these old Okinawan households, they still say Hari Hachi Bu before every meal. And it serves a different purpose today than it did 2,000 years ago. It's a different kind of moderation. They have a special thing called a moai here. Remember that diagnostic question? Do you have 3 good friends? 3 good friends? The average American in 1970 had 3 best friends. Right before the pandemic, it was down to 1.5. And what do you think the next U.S. Census is going to say post-pandemic around isolation in America? Statistically speaking, if you're isolated, if you're clinically lonely, that's like smoking 2 packs of cigarettes every single day. That's the equivalent on your life. The current Surgeon General, Dr. Vivek Murthy, has declared isolation an epidemic, only fueled by social media, by the way, on our kids. Anyways, once again, these women in Okinawa have a lesson that they can teach us. One of the Power 9 is have a right tribe. Have people that can take care of you. Here they have a cultural institution called a moai. A moai, when you're a little Okinawan boy, Okinawan girl, around 4 or 5 years old, mom and dad bring you down to town center. They put you in a group of 4 or 5 boys or 4 or 5 girls, and that's your moai. And you travel through life with your moai, and you take care of each other, and you take care of your community. You're stewards for your community and your heritage. This moai on camera, on screen, has been together for 95 years. Average age of 101 years old. They still get together every single day. They check in on each other. They take care. They gossip about the kids and the neighborhood. Keep everybody honest. Drink a little sake. Argue about who that hot guy liked more in 1948. But the power is in the routine. The power is they belong. Purpose. Purpose. They have a word for purpose called ikigai. Ikigai translated means the reason I get up in the morning. Ikigai. Interesting thing. Who can tell me the two most dangerous years for an American from a mortality standpoint? Birth is number 1, that's correct. Bingo, nailed it. So number 1 is birth. Because of complications at birth, you're very vulnerable. A lot of people might think, 17 is the second most dangerous year. But it's the year you retire. Why is that? Purpose, right? Purpose. In Okinawa, they don't have a word for retirement. It's a Western construct that we have this life of productivity, and then one day it just stops when your pension vests. And then you're done. You just let atrophy come in and take over because you paid your dues. So instead, they practice their purpose. What is their gift? And then they give it away. That's basically what they ask themselves. This 101-year-old Kung Fu master is passing on the art of Kung Fu. This 93-year-old's ikigai, reason for getting up in the morning, is he puts on a wetsuit, bamboo goggles, goes spearfishing, and he uses the catch to go visit his great-grandkids. They use it for their school lunch. There's another guy who could probably have a little sake and arm wrestle. And Kamada-san is holding her great-great-great-granddaughter. We asked her, what does it feel like to hold a descendant over a century removed? And she responded to the interpreter, and the translation came back as, like leaping into heaven. All right, let's go find the American Blue Zone. For a while, we thought we found the American Blue Zone where I'm from, up in Minnesota, in a small community in Minnesota. But when the demographers got there and they peeled back the layers of the onion, it just turned out that all the young people left, leaving artificial number of the oldest old. They all probably came here to Outer Banks. But you get off the San Bernardino Highway, and the first thing you see is a Del Taco and a Wiener Hut. And you've arrived at America's Blue Zone. You're like, what's going on here? Well, it turns out that within the community, there's another community in Loma Linda, California, of Seventh-day Adventists. Seventh-day Adventists, Christian denomination, they totally evangelize with health. They get their Bible, or they get their diet straight from the Bible. Genesis chapter 1 stands 14 to 28. All the trees that bear seeds, all the plant that bear fruit, talks about leafy greens and nuts and legumes, beans. Ostensibly missing is reference to pizzas and hamburgers and T-bone steaks. They don't drink. They don't partake in wine at 5. A lot of them don't drink coffee. They certainly don't smoke. They operate a number of water spas. But this is what I think is so remarkable about them. They're not living in some island way out in the middle of the Aegean Sea or the Pacific or in some highlands. They're driving down the same fast food-filled highways that we are, right here in the Outer Banks. I drove in, I saw them. They're going through the same checkout lanes at the gas station that are like a sweet and salty gauntlet of bad options. They're getting the same social media buzzes and TV subscriptions. But look, somehow they're resisting. Somehow they're getting a decade of more life expectancy than we are. And this is validated. Harvard has been doing a 40-year-long Seventh-day Adventist longitudinal epidemiological study following these Seventh-day Adventists. And it's not genetics. It's not about the genes. There's Hispanic, there's Asian, Pacific, African American, Caucasian, all kinds of Seventh-day Adventists. So it's not about the genes. Even though they're not geographically isolated, like a lot of the islands or highlands, they're a little bit socially and culturally isolated. For example, they celebrate the Sabbath on Saturday instead of on Sunday, and they take it seriously. It doesn't matter if the kids got baseball practice or if you need to go to the grocery store. That's not what Saturday's for. Saturday's to get together, support each other, be together. A nature hike is common, although the definition has evolved over the years of what a nature hike is. But the power is in the routine. They don't just do this sometimes. They do this every week, 52 weeks a year, for decades. They do it together. They keep each other accountable. They're supporting each other. And it's here we have a special Seventh-day Adventist named Ellsworth Warham. Ellsworth Warham, multimillionaire Seventh-day Adventist. We were down there with the cameras. We got put onto him, 90, 91, 92 years old. And even though he's a millionaire, he got quoted from a fence contractor to build a fence on his property. And he said, for that kind of money, I'll do it myself, doggone it. So for the next 3 days, in the Southern California heat, he's out there mixing cement. He's out there digging fence footings and putting this damn thing up. And sure enough, on the 4th day, he ends up in the operating room But that's not Ellsworth on the table. That's Dr. Worm on the left, who at the age of 91, 92 was still performing 4 open heart surgeries every single month. Dr. Oz, back when he was a doctor, Dr. Oz picked up this story for his show and went down there. And they went, Dr. Oz, of course, doctor got to scrub up and go in and see it with his own eyes. Watches Dr. Worm perform open heart surgery. And afterward, Dr. Oz rips his mask off and goes, "Oh my God, how do you do it?" And Dr. Worm goes, "I don't hang out with old folks." Ed Rawlings, 98-year-old, he's a cowboy, he's got his pilot license, swims in the morning, throws up rooster tails in the afternoon. I think he'd fit in well in Outer Banks. Marge Jaton, 104 years old. 104 years old. And she's the only one of 350 centenarians who pumps iron and works out in a gym. All the rest have hobbies or live in environments where they move naturally every single day. She's the only one, wakes up, pumps iron, rides her bike, eats steel-cut oats, stovetop, not microwave, and washes it down with a prune juice shooter. And she's got a great sense of humor. My dad asked her, he was riding shotgun in her root beer colored Cadillac down the San Bernardino Highway doing like 90. And he asked her, "What's the body feel like at 104? And she said, "Well, I tell you what, I felt a lot sexier at 102. So we write it up in the first National Geographic magazine in 2005, immediately go out and discover the last 2 blue zones, Okinawa, Nicoya, Costa Rica, the Nicoya Peninsula, abject poverty. Abject poverty. But get this. If you can reach age 50 here, you have the highest likelihood of reaching age 100 than anywhere else on planet Earth. So despite they don't have any of the infrastructure that we have, if you make it to 50 there, you can make it to 100. Amazing places I've been able to visit a number of times, meet with these centenarians. I mean, they live in huts in the jungle, citrus growing in the front, peppers growing in the back, but they're so far from isolated. You spend about an hour there, all of a sudden, 30 villagers spanning 3 generations show up and start loitering in this woman's front yard, and then it turns out every single one is a relative. They all just mosey on over to see what's going on. Don Bonifacio, 100-year-old cowboy, talks about his girlfriends, rides his horse, who's 100 years old, Corazon in horse years. Once again, we see a plant slant diet. They call it las tres hermanas, beans, corn, and squash. Beans, corn, squash, and they can cook like 1,500 different recipes with just those 3 ingredients, and they're all delicious, they're all cheap, and they're all really good for you. And the final blue zone in the Aegean Sea of Icaria, Greece. Icaria, Greece, this place is known as the land the time forgot. It did not have ports. It did not have port. I Wikipedia'd Outer Banks, by the way, early on when I was meeting with the team. You guys did not have an airstrip until 1930, is what I read. Ironically, and then this is where the Wright brothers took off. But you had ports. This place did not have ports until World War I. Until World War I. We suspect it's because of pirates in the age of antiquity in the Mediterranean basin. So they got rid of all their maritime ports so they couldn't be pillaged. So they didn't have ports, totally isolated. And it's here we have the purest form of the Mediterranean diet anywhere else on planet Earth. Once again, we see move naturally, we see plant slant, we see camaraderie and right tribe and belonging and loved ones first. This picture was taken at a wedding at 2:30 in the morning. It was a party. And the guy on the left is 88, the guy on the right is 93, and neither of them were invited to the party. Swear to God. They just saw that there was a party going on in town, and they walked down and danced and partied. And here we meet a special Icarian man named Stamatis Moriartis. Stamatis Moriartis, he's a World War II vet. He saw action. He saw action in theater in Italy. Got deployed during World War II. A mortar round went off near him, messed up his arm, could not get the health care that he needed in Icaria. So he got on a U.S. frigate to America, lands in Detroit, gets his arm fixed, industrious, hardworking man. So he finds success as a painter, starts his own little painting outfit. Meets a Greek-American girl, bada bing, bada boom. He's got 3 kids and a Chevy, and he's living in suburban Detroit. Life's good. Until 1970s, when one day he woke up, he could not breathe. Had a hard time walking up the stairs, goes to the doctor. The doctor says, I'm sorry, you have terminal lung cancer. You're going to be dead in a year, 2 tops. Goes to 2 other doctors. Same diagnosis, same prognosis. So, feeling pretty miserable and depressed, him and his wife decide, you know what? We're going to move back to Icaria. We're going to move back to the burial costs will be a fraction of what they are in the U.S. There'll be more money for our kids to inherit. So they moved back to Icaria, moved back in with his parents at the age of like 60. So they usually have college kids coming back. Imagine, your 60-year-old kid and his wife moving back in with you. And, not long, he decides, I'm going to plant a vineyard. I'm going to plant a vineyard, and I won't be able to drink it, but my wife can, and my friends can, and they'll think of me, and I'll love that. So he plants a vineyard. Long story medium. In 2006, we meet the guy who's still alive 36 years later, producing 200 liters of wine a year, most of which he drinks. And we ask him, what's your secret? What's your secret? And we were pretty sure it was not his ability to match plaid outfits. And he goes, I don't know, I guess I just forgot to die. And it sounds flippant, but he nailed it. None of these people pursued these things in their life. It ensued. Every one of the Power 9 ensues organically, born from the community they belong to and the environment that they were born into. So, let's recap the Power 9, and then we're going to go on to how do we engineer this using the power of American communities, using the power of self-determination, of policy, of people, of places, and of fun. First of all, move naturally. This is the Power 9 recap. None of these people, except for Marge Jaton, lived sedentary lives and then went and hit the gym for an hour every single day and lived a long, healthy, active, mobile life. They lived in environments that it was easy to make the decision to walk and bike and go visit a neighbor. They lived in deconvenienced homes. There wasn't a button that did this for you and a button. They did things the old-fashioned way. They burned calories doing it. Here's a question for the group. Raise your hand if you walked to school when you were a kid. Walk to school when you were a kid. Look around. It's like 90% of the room. Raise your hand if your kids or grandkids walk to school today. Look around. There's like 2 half hands. What happened? The average kid in America in 1970 got 1.5 miles of free physical activity every single day. And despite what CNN or Fox News tells you, it's safer today to walk to school than it was in 1970. So somehow we've engineered out. Meanwhile, what's happened to childhood obesity in America? It's skyrocketing. All right, right outlook. Remember, 3 out of 5 of these places are at or below the poverty line. I know Outer Banks is a tale of 2 or 3 cities, right? It's 2 or 3 cities in one. You got the people that are living good here. They're active. They're engaged. upper middle class. Then you got people on the other side of the tracks who are struggling. They're single parents. They're in the service sector. They're doing everything they can to afford. And their health disparity is showing it. And then you got the third people who are the tourists and the out-of-towners who come in. The blue zones, they're not living in some sandals resort somewhere drinking Mai Tais. They worry about money. They worry about their kids, but they have rituals to downshift. The Okinawans, they have ancestor venerations. The Sardinians have happy hour. The Seventh-day Adventists have prayer. They have purpose. They practice their purpose every single day. Eat wisely. Obviously, a very different diet than the American diet. Plant slant, 80% plant-based. Beans are ripe for a comeback. You heard it here first. Penny for penny, pound for pound, more protein than a steak. Okay? They're delicious. There's a million ways to cook them. And they're dirt cheap. People always harp about how expensive it is to eat healthy. I don't buy it. You know what healthy food, grains and legumes and veggies and roots, you know what those were called for the last 1,000 years of our species? Peasant food. They were called peasant food. They're dirt cheap. The problem is learning how to cook them, having opportunities to cook them, having the time and bandwidth. I recognize that there's real social determinants of health, but beans. And by the way, if you're a doomsdayer, you go to Costco or Walmart and get like a 40-pound bag of dry beans for like $20, and it'll last you forever. Moderation, hari hachi bu, strategies to not overeat. If I went into your grandparents' pantry, cupboards in 1980, let's say, or 1960 or 1950, and I grabbed a dinner plate, that dinner plate was 10 inches in diameter. If I go to your kitchen tonight and I grab a dinner plate, I bet you it's 12 inches. 12 inches. That extra 2 inches of diameter is 70% more surface area, 70% more caloric intake. So all kinds of different strategies, if you read the book or watch the Netflix, that you can do to make the healthy choice the easy choice. And then all of this sits on a bedrock of who you hang out with. Mama was right. Careful who you hang out with. You are who you hang out with. The CDC tells us that habits are as contagious as a cold. So if your three best friends who have 156% contagion factor on your habits, if their idea of a good time is getting together, smoking cigarettes, eating nachos, watching, who's the local football team here? The Jets or somebody. Maybe don't dump your unhealthy friends, but augment with people like the ones that are in this room here today that want to form a Moai, take care of each other. So how do we make the Blue Zones and Power 9 work for Americans? Make it so that Americans don't have to pursue these things meticulously, but that they ensue. Well, we need it, and we need it in a bad way. Preventable disease, comorbidities, lifestyle-related diseases are skyrocketing in the United States. They're driving up costs, and our traditional interventions do not work. I'm sorry, but gym memberships, supplements, South Beach diet, paleo diet, you name it, they're good ideas. They're good ideas, and they work for a lot of people. They work for a lot of individuals. But as a nation, as a country, they give us short-term wins, but long-term failures. Short-term wins, long-term failures. I defy anybody to show me that America is getting any healthier year over year, decade over decade. So why do those give us short-term wins and long-term failures? The reason is something called the Hawthorne effect. What happens on January 1 to gym memberships? Oh yeah, this is going to be my year. It's going to be my year. And without fail, by April, May, we all fall off the bandwagon. When the cameras are on, we're all good, we're all motivated, but life happens. Life happens to all of us. Discipline is a muscle, and muscles always fatigue. So, if those aren't working, Blue Zones didn't set out. Where is there an example of a community around the world, a best practice, that started out unhealthy and turned the ship around? We found one example, one longitudinal example. North Karelia, Finland. North Karelia, Finland, in 1980 had the dubious distinction of ground zero for heart attacks amongst middle-aged men. Men at the age of 55 were dropping dead at record rates in North Karelia, Finland in 1980. And they did something. They did a new novel approach to population health that looks at environment and programs together. And you know what they did? They dropped cardiovascular disease by 80%, and they've kept it there to this day. 35 years of keeping it. That's called sustainability. That's what sustainability looks like. So what did they do? They recognized that discipline is a muscle and muscles fatigue. Unless you're Tom Brady or Serena Williams and you have a private vegan chef who's cooking delicious meals for you every day, discipline is not going to be your friend. Too much happens. You're a firefighter, you're a teacher, you're a single mom. We fall off the bandwagon. You have a long day. You watch a presidential debate, and now you're depressed and you want to go eat some ice cream. Discipline's a muscle, muscles fatigue. The people of blue zones that we met earlier tonight, they don't have better willpower or discipline than we do. Instead, they live in environments. We call it life radius model. They have a life radius around them, usually 10 to 20 miles, where the healthy choice is the easy choice, is the default choice, is the obvious choice, is the promoted choice, is the architected choice. And what we do at Blue Zones, this is the model that we partner with American cities that are already doing a lot of this work. We add jet fuel. Sometimes we've got to build it from scratch, but usually not. We work with communities, evaluate if it's a good fit, evaluate if it's part of the story that you want. We do an assessment, find out what's working, what's not working, what's being measured, what's not being measured, and then we set up a franchise. We hire a local team from the Outer Banks. We train them. We give them the brand, the IP. We set up a governance steering committee made up of Outer Banks leaders. We set up committees, schools, grocery stores, restaurants, policy, built environment, food system, media, all informed by residents. And then we hire people, full-time jobs, really good compensation jobs, and we train them across 3 areas. The first is people. People who are going to get the brand, the tools, the training to go out and get 20% of the people in the community engage. On-ramp them to the Power 9, any of the Power 9, doesn't matter. Empower them to do their own Wine at 5 Moais or walking Moais, purpose workshops, cooking demonstrate. I mean, you wouldn't believe what all these communities come up with and leverage the content. Screenings of the Netflix. The second team is the place-based team. And they're going to go door to door. They're going to hit the pavement for 5 years. And they're going to offer every restaurant, bar, grocery store, corner store, convenience store, school, employer, church, synagogue, mosque, an opportunity for free to join the movement, to become a Blue Zones approved business. For example, a restaurant gets to join the movement, and we're going to drive, you better believe we're going to drive traffic and awareness to them. Host events there. I know Wes supported some of the catering already tonight. Thank you, Wes, wherever you are. Right in front of me. You're first in line to become Blue Zones approved. But for an example, at a restaurant, cost-neutral tweaks that make the healthy choice the easy choice. For example, if you want to go to your favorite deli over lunch and get a turkey club sandwich, go ahead. Go have a turkey club sandwich. You might be surprised, though, that since becoming Blue Zones approved, the default side, is fresh fruit that comes with that. Now, in this country, if I want fries with my sandwich, I better well have fries with my sandwich. And you can have them. You just got to ask for them, and then you can have them. But guess what most people do? They just eat the damn fruit. So we're not messing with the business model. We're just changing defaults. And there's about 30 things that a restaurant can do that are cost neutral that make them Blue Zones approved. You do that across all these different sectors of places. The third team is the policy team. These are going to be people with a background in policy, advocacy, lobbying. Maybe they're formerly policy makers. And they're going to advance, with your support, policy wins around built environment and food systems. And it's not a silver bullet approach. It's a silver buckshot approach. When you're making enough of these permanent and semi-permanent changes to policy, to places, to people, you got publicity and media to celebrate the wins, celebrate the schools and the congregations and the individuals and the policy wins. That's why it's so important that we're meeting with Dare County and the mayors and the council members, that they're going to follow through on these policy recommendations if we move forward. That's how you start to create an evidence-based effect that mimics the effect of living in a blue zones, where residents and tourists are getting a little healthier without even knowing it. They're making one better choice every single day or more unconsciously. And that's really the secret of the blue zones. That's life radius model. That is our bread and butter. So the process to get there, to get to people, places, and policy, we have been contracted with Outer Banks Health and ECU Health Partnership in Dare County as well to do a 6-month evaluation. Is there readiness? Is policy going to be on board? Are places going to engage? So in addition to the 60 people that got us here today, there's over 300 residents in the next 3 days that are participating in focus groups around schools and work sites and policy to inform us what's working, what's not working, what's the low-hanging fruit, and what can we do together that neither you nor us have ever done before that Blue Zones will give us a license to do. We will leave here after this week and come back in 60 days with a proposal, a public report, quantitative, and qualitative, as well as a proposal to move forward for 5 years as the first ever Blue Zone project on the eastern seaboard north of Florida. If we move forward, there'll be a 9-month foundation period. This is when we're bringing in Gallup to do an oversample. We're hiring the team. We're creating the Outer Banks blueprint. We're putting together the steering committees and the governance committees to build the apparatus, to build the NUCO, the Outer Banks Blue Zones project. And then for 3 to 4 years, they're going to hit the pavement and go get critical mass, tipping point in people, places, and policy. Does it work? Has it worked elsewhere? We did our first one in Minnesota, Albert Lee. Walter Willett from Harvard University wrote it up in Newsweek, called the results stunning. From there, we went to another coastal community, Beach Cities of California. 150,000 Americans, cultural melting pot of Americans. The current Surgeon General of the United States, he was Surgeon General under Obama. He visited that work and gave us some strong commendations for that work. That one actually is being written up in a peer-reviewed publication now that's been going on for 15 years. There's some evidence of population risk improvement at scale. Went to Iowa, the pork state, partnered with Blue Cross Blue Shield and the governor to launch 14 cities there. U.S. Conference of Mayors celebrated that work. And then Fort Worth, Texas, which is still the biggest community we've ever done. Over 1 million Americans. Cowtown, USA, health system there won a lot of awards for that work. We're very proud of that partnership. And this is the footprint today. By the end of the year, there will be over 90 American cities that own their own Blue Zone project. And every single one of them is different. You better believe Fort Worth, Texas, and Beach Cities of California, very different. But all of them doing the same life radius model. But they're doing it through the lens of their own journey, of their own community. And here's the communities that are looking to do this in 2025. And I took the liberty of showing you just how emphasized it would be to launch in Eastern North Carolina. This slide, a lot of words on this slide. The punchline on this slide is simply that when you aim at well-being and you have a well-being strategy, the downstream outcomes are more than population health and public health. They're economic development, they are health equity, they're workforce outcomes, they're follow-on grants. There's a lot of reason to believe that well-being ought to be the new North Star metric for community development in America. We partner with Gallup, which has the official well-being metric anywhere in the world. They have the largest survey data set that asks people, how are you doing today? How's life going for you today? And how do you think life's going to go a couple years from now, AKA hope? And here's one of the incredible things about this. It's got more predictive power than claims or utilization data. So for those of you who are in healthcare, the predictive power is more than claims and utilization data for predicting onset of disease. And not surprisingly, we see that every 1 point improvement in the Gallup Well-Being Index for a community, whether it's an individual, an organization, or a city, translates into lower healthcare spend. Lower healthcare spend. Remember that. And here's the part that I nerd out on, and why I think this might be a new North Star metric. It turns out that there's early plausibility indication, so not causal, but plausible, that if you can move the needle on all 5 dimensions of the well-being index, there's more than just population health outcomes for communities. All right. I'm going to skip that, and I'm going to talk a little bit about America. How are we doing in America? We're not doing great. We're a little bit at a tipping point, and the pandemic did not help. Americans are struggling. With or without a good or strong economy, Americans are struggling. And even though we're getting sicker, we're spending 20% of our GDP on healthcare. 20%, $4 trillion a year on healthcare, and we're getting sicker, and we're getting chubbier, and we're getting more pissed off. Despite this massive spend, that's money that could be spent on roads and bridges, or military, or science, or education. And by the way, guess who pays for that at the end of the day? We do, right? And either higher taxes or passing the buck on to the next generation. Our chief science officer at Blue Zones runs the Well-Being Center at Oxford University. He's a behavioral economics professor at Oxford. Came out with the 2024 World Happiness Report. And for the first time in 20 years, America fell out of the top 20 happiest countries on earth. And it wasn't because of our boomers, and it wasn't because of our middle-aged millennials. It was because of our youth. Our youth. Most Americans experience what statisticians call a happiness curve. We're young and dumb, a happiness U-shape. We're young and dumb, and we're pretty happy. We don't know better. Then all of a sudden we leave mom and dad, we get out of college, we're poor, then when we start having kids, we're at the bottom of the totem pole, things are tough. Kids get older, things get better, we get through midlife crisis, start making money, and then, we end up pretty good on our sunset years, a U-shape. What this report told us is that our youth are experiencing their midlife crisis before they hit 10 years old. That they're cratering before real life even comes their way. Whoops. Clicker spazzed out on me. I was so powerful that the computer skipped. So what do we do about it? So these are the ingredients for success. How do we do transformational work for us and for posterity? Number one, you have to have leaders. Not consensus. You just have to turn on CNN or Fox News to see you don't get consensus anywhere. But you can have leadership, heroic leadership, the type of leadership we've all read about and seen about, and some of us have been a part of. You got to have plurality in leadership to move the needle. You have to have resources. We didn't get here overnight. We're not going to get out of this situation overnight. It costs real money, real resource. You have to have an evidence-based design, and you have to have accountability. And I'm cheesy. I'm a big believer that leadership carries the day. It is not enough to have the wisdom to make the healthy choice the easy choice. That's not enough anymore. You have to have the courage to make it the unavoidable choice. At the end of the day, I said, Dan, talk to my old man, Dad, what does everybody need? Everybody in this world needs 4 things. Someone to love, something to look forward to, some way to give back, and something to do. And if we can give everybody in our community these 4 things, they will go and get the outcomes for us. They will create the new Outer Banks, next Outer Banks story for us. But again, we have to have the courage to help them with environment and program. With that, I'm going to transition to Q&A. I will leave you with one last story, though. One last story. Remember Stomitis Moriartis, the guy who had terminal lung cancer, went back? People always ask me in the Q&A, they go, well, how's it possible he beat lung cancer? That doesn't pass the sniff test. So we actually called him back in 2009 and said, Stomitis, did you ever wonder what happened to your terminal lung diagnosis? He goes, yeah, I went back to the U.S. In 2006 and tried to meet with my doctors, but I couldn't because they were all already dead. Thank you, everybody. That's what I got for you. So, we've got about 10, 15 minutes before we'll have Amy come up and do some closing remarks. And as I've belated, we want to hear from you. What's up with Outer Banks? Is this a good fit for Outer Banks? Why not? What questions do you have? What's your Outer Banks instincts tell you? Yes?
So, hey, I'm Jim. I live in Southern Shores and I'm employed by the town of Duck. But I think, first of all, excellent presentation. You're engaging and hilarious and very informative. Do I need to repeat myself for the video? So I'm Jim. I work for the town of Duck. I live in Southern Shores, and excellent presentation, engaging, insightful, hilarious,
Thanks, Jim.
all at the same time. Is there something that we have that's easily accessible for someone who heard this presentation to go present this to our local elected officials? Say if you wanted to get on the agenda to make a presentation at a local town council meeting?
That is a great question. If you go to this QR code or grab anybody from Outer Banks Health or ECU Health, they're wearing the name tags, ask me about Ignite, there's a landing page. There's a landing page that's all about Blue Zones Ignite with all the resources and information that both talk about Blue Zones, but as well as the work that we've been doing in Outer Banks. So that's a dialed-in landing page.
This crowd is very encouraging for the success of this.
Thank you, Jim. Yes?
There are a few young people here in the audience. Oh, thank you very much. There are a few young people in the audience, but some of us are a little bit, I guess, in the 4th quarter. My question is it too late? After 6, 7 decades of a certain lifestyle, you presented a lot of very, I'll just call them desirable aspects of the way one should live one's life. But is it too late to start? I mean, is the damage done? The ship has sailed? What do you think? I'm not a great example of the 9, so I'm asking for a...
You look good from back here.
I'm asking for a friend.
Yeah. Well, let your friend know that unless they're approaching 100, like a lot of the world's longest lived people that we talked about today, they've got 20, 30 years of good life ahead of them. And it's not just about more years. Remember George Carlin, the comedian? Yeah, so there's like only one George Carlin quote I can say in public. And it's not just about adding more years to your life, but adding more life to those years. Go ahead.
Real quick, the last one.
Yeah.
I see on television bombarded with supplements. No prescription. These will make you feel better, your energy level. Everybody see those? You can start running marathons again at age 70. It's perfect. Just take these 3 capsules a day. Give me an honest assessment. Is that just marketing nonsense?
I'm not a doctor. I see Dr. Bowen's nodding her head in a
Dr.
vigorous
Bowen,
way.
Where's Christina? The answer is. Okay.
I tell you what, you can be sure that behind the smoke screen, there's somebody making a lot of money to sell those supplements. And in healthcare, there's something called community health needs assessments that happens every 3 years for the last 12 years, 15 years. And I'm critical of it because pretty much all it's done is document the continued decline of American health and well-being. But I can tell you that lifestyle, changing your lifestyle rather than a supplement, even little tweaks, reverses risk factors for disease. So you ask, is it too late? You wouldn't believe what a clean living will do to a body, even yours, after only a couple of weeks. But hey, I also believe in everything in moderation, including moderation itself. So, live a little. What other questions? Yes.
Hi. Can you give an example of what is being done in the schools in some of those American cities that you've been having the blue zones at?
Yeah. I'm gonna Kelsey, how you feeling back there? You want to talk about schools? Sure. Can we give Kelsey a mic? Introduce yourself. She's one of our experts here.
Hi everyone, I'm Kelsey, I'm with Blue Zones. I've been with Blue Zones for, since about 2015, and I had the privilege of working with our places within our Hawaii communities. So I've done a lot of work with schools, and some of the initiatives we look at is based on the age of the kids. And so we look at, if they're having the ability to move naturally throughout their day, is it incorporated in the curriculum? Oh, hello! We're looking at, the food access. Are they eating healthy throughout the day? Is there farm-to-table options? Are there community gardens that they're accessing? Really, if they're having that sense of belonging. And then when we kind of age into high school age kids, we're also looking at the other Power 9. So how can we incorporate a sense of purpose to help them drive towards making the right choices as they age? And so it's really based on the age of the kids that we're working with and the locations of the schools.
Kelsey, can you talk about walking school bus?
Yes, so we do a lot of work with walking school buses. So we've been on some tours today. It sounds like a lot of that is happening organically, but we look at safe routes to school. So how are neighborhoods connected to schools? How can we get the community activated so that, if we come back in 3 to 5 years and we ask the same question of how many kids are walking to school, you can raise your hand and say a lot more because they have access to safe routes. They're walking in groups. They have individuals in the community that are really volunteering to lead those efforts. So when we talk about connecting aging individuals with the youth in communities, the walking school buses are a really great opportunity to look at chances to really connect across all ages in the community and give back.
What was your name? Who asked the question? Tiana. Tiana, why'd you ask that question?
Well, specifically, I was just wondering, if you found the school to not have, students aren't getting enough healthy options or they're not having. Thank you. If the schools, if the students aren't having access to healthy options or having lunch or food at all, is that something that you help the school to get, or is it something you just work with legislature to get?
Yeah. So part of this, like tomorrow there'll be a school workshop, which we encourage attendance, but the school superintendents will be a part of that. So that we're evaluating, are they ready to roll up their sleeves and do some things? And then if so, what are those things? And they're evaluating us as well. For example, is there a snack in the hallway policy? So some schools allow kids to have snacks in the hallway. Guess what they're probably eating, right? It's not it's chips and Snickers. But at the same time, some kids, they're on SNAP. They're not getting breakfast at home before they go to school. So finding that nuance while prepping them for better lifestyle choices. Do you have a read on schools in Outer Banks personally? How they're faring?
No comment.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your question. Others? Yeah, yes, and then we'll go to the back.
Hi, I'm Mary Alice Hayward. I live in Duck. You have been touching a little bit at the end of your presentation on the process that you're currently engaged in here. For those of us who don't know that, could you take a few minutes to outline what you're actually doing right now as part of this process of sort of testing out whether or not the Outer Banks is a potential blue zone candidate?
Yeah, we learned after doing this work for 15 years across 90 cities that you cannot do it to a community. Americans don't work that way. Most communities around the world probably don't work that way. And so it has to be something, it has to be like a franchise model. It has to be like, hey, this jives with what we want and what we're doing, and we think that together we can go do this in a big way that's transformative, permanent, semi-permanent, accountable, measurable, celebrating. And so we have a dating period. And that's what every community has to go through, this 6-month dating period. We call it an Ignite or an assessment. And there's 60 days of pre-planning, right? So this week is executed well. There's a team of Blue Zone's national experts around built environment, food system, places, development. And we start to engage with the community, grassroots and grass tips, to start to understand from a qualitative standpoint what's going on in schools, what's going on for resources for employers, what's going on in the faith-based community, in the policy realm, in the people programmatic realm, in the built environment realm. So tomorrow there'll be focus groups all day long. There'll be a community presentation where leaders present to us so we can learn a little bit more than the little Wikipedia I did. I'm just kidding. There's a lot of exchange already happening long before this week. We will bring our instruments that talk about the ROI that comes with moving the needle on well-being. Remember I talked about that $4 trillion a year? That's tripling. That's tripling in the next 10 years of healthcare spend. So every community in America has its pro rata share of that economic burden. We will leave and come back in 60 days with a report. We are an open kimono, and we will present that report to the public. It will be posted online, and the community will be able to say, does this sound like us? Do we like what they found? And then we'll have a 5-year proposal to launch the project, and there'll be private sector dollars. So public sector does not pay for this work, taxpayer dollars. It's primarily large employers, healthcare, foundations that get to be the sponsors. So that's the process that we're in right now. Yes, in the back.
Yes, and can you address the quality of food in the United States, particularly the GMP, the genetically modified food, pesticides that are sprayed, a whole host of other things?
All right.
Grass-fed meat that corn.
Yeah. So I'm not going to put her on the spot, but Claudia, raise your hand. So go talk to Claudia. She's our food expert for the week here from the Blue Zone's food expert bench. I'll tell you who the enemy is in the eyes of Blue Zones. Ultra-processed foods. Ultra-processed foods are criminal. Criminal. Food companies spend $50 billion a year on Madison Avenue in New York City for advertising. PepsiCo, Frito-Lay, Anheuser-Busch. You know what that money is spent on? Ubiquity. The name of the game for them is ubiquity. Have their products everywhere. Your vending machine at the church, your kids' cafeteria, your checkout lanes. I mean, they're doing Life Radius model. They are just making the unhealthy choices, the addictive, ubiquitous choices in our environment. So I always say this to people. I say, shape your environment, and your environment will shape you. That's why a lot of you move here, for the environment, because you want it to shape you in all kinds of ways. But if you don't shape your environment, somebody else will, or already is. So you asked a question about GMOs. I'm not an expert. I don't want to come across as a know-it-all. But ultra-processed foods, if we can pin them down with policy and place-based change and education, us and our kids would be a lot better off. Question? All right, well then I'm going to invite, oh, we do have a question, I'm sorry.
Mark Martin, you talked about, or you acknowledged earlier about us being a tourist area. We've got a lot of influx of tourists. Any of the other communities you're working with have that same component? Because we've got a lot of stresses here in that Power 9 that may not be just food related, but a lot of other stresses for our employees and people live here.
Yeah, what was your name? Mark Martin. I'll tell you a couple things. One, yes, we do have a lot of communities that are tourist destinations. Naples, Florida, Hawaii, beach cities of California, Jacksonville. By the end of the year, Miami Beach, who's in the market for a new narrative, and Galveston, Texas. So yes, and the reason they do it is a lot of the reasons we talked about tonight, but also because they want people to associate them with more than just a place to come and party. They want people to come and to feel good and to contribute when they come and visit. But the other thing that I heard in your question was affordability and wages and recruitment of service industry. And we do some of that work to make sure that what we're doing is passing through the prism of your reality, but we're not a panacea. And so I don't want to make promises that we just don't do. And so some things are outside of our swim lane, but we don't do them with blinders on. With that, I want to thank you all for having me here today, and hold your applause because Amy Montgomery is bringing us home, whether she knows it or not.
That's a hard act to follow. Thank you, Danny. Another round of applause for Danny Buettner. So I wanted to quickly follow up on a couple of the questions that came up tonight about things going on in the schools, and I think there were some examples given of things that are going on nationally that maybe some of you in the room don't know we already do here. We have the Safe Routes to School program already in place in Dare County. So Dr. Palma's here, formerly the principal of Nags Elementary School. We've done walk to school day, bike to school day there. So when we said early on, I think Dr. Bowen said it, Danny said it, others said it, that we're already a light shade of blue. We really are. We're already doing a fantastic job of many of the things that will make the healthy choice the easy choice, exactly. So I just wanted to share tonight a little bit more about why Outer Banks Health and Dare County Department of Health and Human Services is involved in this work. So, we got through the pandemic, and then at Outer Banks Health, we completed building the cancer center. And we sat around and looked at each other and said, well, what's the new frontier? What's next? And wholeheartedly, a resounding answer to that question is well-being. And why would we choose well-being? And the answer is really simple and really clear. If we know that there are people in the world living long and living healthy without a hospital in sight, right? Then we need to also be working in the space that the blue zones can help us influence, right? Your environment, the culture. That's another space that we at Outer Banks Health and Dare County Department of Health and Human Services, we just feel responsible for working on those things and influencing the culture and influencing the environment, because we know we're proud to provide high-quality health care services here and access to health care and cancer services and the emergency department and primary care that's grown so much in the past couple years. But there's that other space we feel responsible to work in, and that's well-being. And that is genuine from Outer Banks Health and from the Department of Health and Human Services here in the community. So I also wanted to, before we close tonight, I'm going to tell a story at the end, but before I do that, I don't want to go any further without thanking the team of people who helped put this event together. So I thank Christina Bowen for being our executive sponsor, our leader. Thank you. We really appreciate President Ronnie Sloan for all of his leadership and support. Thank you, Ronnie. Jennifer Schwartzenberg, if Blue Zones tries to steal you. DJ. All right. Jennifer Schwartzenberg. Wendy Kelly. Lindsay McCone, Anna Haycox, Tess Judge, Sue Woolard, Krista Sipe, and Sheila Davies. Julie Eilert is also here. She's our Chief of Experience for this system. Julie, where are you? Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your support. Appreciate you. Okay, so I'm going to end with a quick story. If you attended the gala, you've already heard this, and I'm sorry, but with all the sex jokes, I had to keep the party going. All right. So, again, we've talked a lot about environment, right? But at the end of the day, many of you came tonight to think about me, right? Who in this room came tonight to figure out what can I do personally, right? Raise your hand. Okay, so here's my quick story, and if you heard it at the gala, I'm sorry. But when I was in graduate school at East Carolina University, this is a true story, part of my graduate assistantship was to teach the freshman level health and wellness course at ECU. So my father, I was a first generation college graduate. Neither one of my parents graduated from college. So they were so proud. Not only was their daughter going to graduate school, but my goodness, she was teaching a college course. So they said, well, Amy, one day when you're teaching, we're just going to show up and we're going to sit in the back of the class. So they came one day. Guess what was on the syllabus that day? It's health and wellness. You know what they teach in college? Yeah, sex ed. So my parents roll in, back of the classroom, true story. I can still see them sitting. They're about where you are, Beverly, in the back left corner of the room. I was so nervous. And guess what the lesson was that day? The 10 steps to condom use. So here's the lesson in the 10 steps to condom use. That was 30 years ago. We were making a lot of mistakes in health education, right? How many of those students in that classroom left there and felt like, I can use a condom, and I can do it right, every time, 10 steps. How many? No, nobody, right? So here's the lesson. Don't overthink it. It's not that difficult. Rob Ross, are you still here? Don't go on the internet looking for the silver bullet. It doesn't exist. Your only assignment for tonight leaving here, because back to me, what can I do? Danny asked you some questions tonight, and everybody except for the 3 people who were dismissed to the bar had at least 1 or 2 things, right, that you couldn't raise your hand to. Mine was, and I'm a vegetarian, so I'm really being vulnerable here. I don't eat 3 or 4 vegetables a day. I can do better on that, okay? So I'm going to leave here tonight. I'm going to pick that one thing, because next time I'm with Danny and he asks the survey, I'm raising my hand to that question, right? So what's your thing or that you couldn't raise your hand tonight? Right? What is it? Sleep? Is that your thing? Whatever it is, answer it for yourself. It's as simple as that. Leave here tonight and do one thing in that one space where you couldn't raise your hand to that question. All right? I want everybody in this room to be well, and thank you so much. Give yourselves a round of applause for coming. And thank you again, Blue Zones. Thank you.